If I told you that 70% of households in the US experience physical violence, you probably assume I was talking about, I don't know, a localized war zone.
Right, or some kind of intense crisis situation.
Exactly. But I'm actually just describing the average American living room.
Which is wild to think about.
It is, because 82% of children live with a sibling, making sibling brawls the most common form of physical violence in a family.
Yeah, and the sources we're looking at today note that kids can fight up to 8 times an hour. 8 times.
Which is just exhausting. I mean, we expect high-stakes negotiations to happen across mahogany tables with, trained diplomats.
But the reality is the most volatile conflict zones are just in our own kitchens.
Seriously, where we're trying to negotiate a peace treaty with someone who is currently screaming on the floor because their banana was peeled the wrong way.
And those makeshift diplomats, the parents, the caregivers,
Yeah.
are usually running on like 4 hours of sleep and cold coffee.
Yeah, it's a highly unpredictable environment. So for today's deep dive, we are pulling apart a massive stack of psychological research, pediatric guidelines, and behavioral therapy protocols.
We really want to figure out what is actually happening in those intense moments.
Right. The mission here is to understand why kids act the way they do, how you can effectively manage it without losing your mind, and to uncover a pretty massive paradigm shift.
Which is that the ultimate secret to child behavior actually has very little to do with the child.
Which is a huge plot twist, but we will get to that. First, okay, let's unpack this toddler brain, because the psychological literature makes it incredibly clear that the very first step is decoding the behavior itself.
Right. You have to strip away your adult assumptions.
Yeah, we have to realize that a toddler melting down over like a blue bowl versus a red bowl is driven by biology, not malice.
Exactly. If you look at the toddler brain, so roughly ages 1 to 3, there is this massive mismatch in developmental timelines.
They are developing incredibly rapidly, right? Gaining these very strong, distinct preferences about their world.
Oh, they know exactly what they want.
But they completely lack the expressive language to articulate those preferences.
And even more importantly, they lack the impulse control to manage the frustration when reality doesn't align with what they want.
Which is constantly happening when you're 2.
Exactly. The neural pathways in the prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for executive function, basically the brain's management system, those simply aren't built yet.
They physically cannot put on the brakes when they feel an overwhelming emotion.
They literally don't have the hardware for it yet.
So raising a toddler is essentially like handing the keys of a high-performance sports car to someone who doesn't have a steering wheel or a brake pedal.
That is a perfect analogy. The engine is just revving.
The gas pedal is glued to the floor, but there is no mechanical way to stop the vehicle. So as the parent, you have to be the external brakes.
You have to be the steering wheel until their brain physically develops those parts.
And it's not just toddlers, right? Because the research shows this lack of internal brakes extends even further into childhood and adolescence for kids with ADHD.
Yes, absolutely. The diagnostic criteria for ADHD fundamentally describe a deficit in that exact same executive function.
So it's a neurodevelopmental impairment in the ability to, plan, organize, and control impulses.
Right, and what is vital to understand here, and the sources really emphasize this, is that kids with ADHD desperately want to be successful.
They want to be good.
They do. They want to be organized. They want to sit quietly when asked. They want to follow those multi-step instructions.
But they literally do not know how to make their brains execute those commands.
Right, the cognitive bridge between knowing what to do and actually doing it is just out.
That is such a critical distinction, because we so often view a child who can't sit still or who forgets their homework as defiant or lazy.
When really, it's not a refusal to behave, it's an inability to execute the behavior.
So the parent has to step in and temporarily act as their executive function.
Exactly. You provide the external structure, the visual cues, the organization, until the child can gradually build compensatory skills.
And this reframing applies to the strong-willed child as well, doesn't it?
Oh, yeah. The behavioral literature has almost entirely abandoned the word stubborn.
I love that.
They reframe these kids as highly intelligent individuals with a very strong sense of autonomy.
Right, so the strong-willed kid who refuses to budge isn't pushing back just to, humiliate you in the middle of Target.
No, they are asserting their intelligence. They demand to understand the reasoning behind a request.
Because I said so just doesn't compute for a brain that is wired to question and analyze.
It really doesn't.
Yeah.
And what's fascinating here is how understanding that underlying biology completely shifts our own paradigm.
It moves us out of a defensive posture. I mean, you can't be angry at someone for not using a brake pedal that literally hasn't been installed yet.
Right. It changes your reaction from anger to compassion. But of course, the big question is, how do we operate as those external brakes without resorting to just yelling all day?
Right. So let's pivot to the playbook. Because the pediatric behavioral guidelines offer some highly specific strategies, especially for high-energy kids or those with executive dysfunction.
And the absolute foundation of that playbook is structure.
But not like verbal rules shouted across the room.
No, visual, tangible structure. Things like visual clocks that show time disappearing as a red slice of a pie.
Because they can't conceptualize time otherwise.
Exactly. Setting up clear routines and creating designated quiet spaces.
Wait, I want to highlight those quiet spaces because the sources make a huge distinction here. These are distinctly different from a traditional timeout.
Yes, very different. Timeouts are historically used as punitive isolation. Like you did a bad thing, go to your room.
Right. But the quiet spaces recommended in modern protocols are safe havens.
They're sensory deprivation zones for when a child feels overstimulated and just needs a minute to regulate their nervous system.
It's a tool, not a prison cell for bad behavior.
Exactly. Another fascinating environmental strategy from the sources is this concept of green time.
Oh, this is so interesting.
Right. Environmental psychology research demonstrates that playing in nature, so grass, trees, dirt, unpredictable terrain, reduces ADHD symptoms significantly.
Like significantly compared to playing on concrete playgrounds or in indoor gyms.
Yes, and the mechanism behind this is called attention restoration theory.
Basically, the idea is that concrete environments, like a paved schoolyard or a busy street, require what's called directed attention.
Meaning you have to consciously focus to avoid bumping into things or to follow rigid playground rules.
Which totally drains the brain's energy, but nature provides soft fascination.
I love that phrase, soft fascination.
Right. The rustling of leaves or just, a bug crawling in the dirt. It holds the child's attention effortlessly, which allows their directed attention fatigue to actually recover.
It's basically plugging their brain into a charger.
Yeah.
And the type of physical outlet matters immensely, too.
Oh, the sports recommendations were super specific.
Yeah, for organized sports, pediatricians highly recommend constant motion sports for kids struggling with attention and hyperactivity.
So things like basketball, hockey, swimming, or martial arts.
Martial arts are particularly effective, actually, because they pair continuous physical exertion with intense mental focus and self-control.
While sports with high downtime like baseball or softball, where, a kid might be standing in the outfield staring at the sky for 20 minutes waiting for a fly ball, those are often a recipe for disaster.
Yeah, their brains need a continuous drip of dopamine and engagement to stay regulated.
And if the sport doesn't provide it, they will find a way to get it, usually by acting out.
Exactly. And we have to mirror that engagement in how we communicate with them, too.
Because kids with behavioral challenges receive a disproportionate amount of negative feedback.
Oh, an overwhelming amount. They hear, no, stop, sit down, hundreds of times a day.
So the behavioral therapy protocols emphasize the technique of praising the opposite behavior.
You have to actively hunt for moments when they are doing the right thing.
Like if a chronically chaotic kid sits quietly coloring for exactly 2 minutes, you praise those 2 minutes like they just won an Olympic gold medal.
You really do. Catch them being good, as they say.
Now, I want to talk about one of the most brilliant tactics I came across for managing strong-willed kids.
Yeah.
The ones who demand autonomy.
Ah, the visual poster.
Yes, letting a visual poster be the boss. So instead of commanding a child to get dressed, which immediately triggers their need to assert control and sparks a power struggle, you create a visual morning routine poster together.
You draw out waking up, brushing teeth, getting dressed, eating.
And it becomes this genius mediation tool.
It really does. When the child is dawdling, the parent doesn't issue a command. The parent points and asks, what does the poster say we're supposed to do next?
You completely remove the parent-child friction. You are no longer the dictator giving orders.
You and the child are partners consulting an objective third party.
The poster is the authority.
Right.
But okay, let me push back on this a little bit, because we need to ground this in the messy reality of a Tuesday morning.
Fair enough.
A visual poster sounds great in a vacuum, but when my coffee is spilling, I'm already late for a meeting, and my kid is staring at their shoes like they are alien artifacts.
We've all been there.
Right. Asking them to consult a poster or trying to mediate a complex sibling dispute over a plastic dinosaur, it sounds incredibly time-consuming. Sometimes you just need them to put the shoes on immediately.
The frustration is completely valid. It's the #1 hurdle parents face with these strategies.
So what do the experts say to that?
Well, the counterargument comes down to the actual return on investment of your time. Yes, pausing to reference the poster or mediating a dispute takes 3 minutes up front.
3 very long minutes.
True. But demanding compliance and triggering a full-blown power struggle often results in a 45-minute tantrum on the floor.
Where no one is putting on shoes anyway.
Exactly. So you are investing 3 minutes of patience to save 40 minutes of chaos.
That makes a lot of sense when you put it like that.
And think about those sibling fights happening 8 times an hour. The instinct is to swoop in, arbitrate the dispute, take the toy away, and declare if you can't share, no one gets it.
Which is fast.
It is fast, but it teaches the children absolutely zero conflict resolution skills. It practically guarantees they will fight again in 10 minutes.
So true mediation involves what? Stepping between them and giving them the language?
Yes. You say, you both want the truck. What is the plan? You give them the language to negotiate. It takes longer in the moment, but it builds the prefrontal cortex skills that eventually make the fighting stop.
Okay, but what about the toddlers who are already past the point of negotiation? The ones actively melting down?
You can't just tell an overloaded nervous system to calm down.
Right, you have to offer an acceptable physical outlet to process the adrenaline.
Saying something like, you can rip this magazine paper, or you can stomp your feet on the rug to get the mat out, but I will stop you from hitting.
You are physically blocking the unsafe behavior while allowing the intense emotion to exist and move through their body.
Exactly. But here's where it gets really interesting. Because all of these strategies, the green time, the poster, the conflict mediation, they bring us to the massive plot twist in the literature.
Yes, the plot twist. None of these tools work if the parent is dysregulated.
You cannot act as the external brakes for a speeding car if your own brake fluid is completely empty.
And modern parenting essentially creates a perfect storm for chronic nervous system dysregulation.
It really does. We are dealing with an intense, often invisible mental load.
Remembering permission slips, pediatrician appointments, grocery lists, outgrown shoes.
Combine that with chronic sleep deprivation and the fact that a child's intense emotions often resurface the parent's own unhealed childhood wounds.
It's a lot. And we tend to think of dysregulation just as, feeling angry. But the sources break it down into 3 distinct types.
Right. First, there is emotional dysregulation, which is the inability to cope with intense feelings of rage, sadness, or frustration.
Then there is cognitive dysregulation. This is when your thoughts are racing, your memory is shot, and your brain just feels entirely scattered.
And finally, physical dysregulation, which is sensory overload.
Physical dysregulation is huge. It's that feeling of being touched out because a small human has been clinging to your leg all day.
Or feeling like the sheer volume of noise in the house is physically vibrating under your skin.
It is like trying to run a high-def video game on a laptop that is already running a background antivirus scan with 100 browser tabs open.
The fan is screaming and the system just freezes.
You cannot act as a grounding wire for your kid's emotional lightning strike if you are already electrified yourself.
Exactly. So to combat that state, psychologists use what they call the PCR framework: practical, conscious, realistic.
Let's break those down. The practical pillar is addressing your basic biological needs, right?
Blood sugar, hydration, sleep. You cannot out-therapize severe sleep deprivation.
If you are surviving on leftover goldfish crackers and 3 hours of sleep, your baseline reactivity is going to be incredibly high.
It's just biology. Then, the conscious pillar requires looking inward at your own unmet childhood needs.
This one is deep. Often the specific behaviors that trigger us about our children, maybe it's whining or crying loudly or making a mess, they trigger us because we were not allowed to express those behaviors when we were young.
Right. If we were punished for being loud, our kid being loud feels like an existential threat.
Managing that requires actively reparenting yourself in those heated moments.
And then the realistic pillar is accepting that certain seasons of life are just going to be about survival.
If you have a newborn or a child going through a major developmental regression, exhaustion is the baseline.
The expectation of maintaining a perfectly serene, aesthetically pleasing household is a myth. And it's a myth that only fuels deeper dysregulation.
Which naturally brings us to the ultimate antidote we found in the research.
Right. Because when the laptop freezes and you yell, because perfection is a myth, and you inevitably will lose your cool, the inner critic instantly takes over.
That voice in your head immediately starts playing a highlight reel of your failures, telling you that you are causing lasting trauma to your child.
And the tragic irony is that the inner critic actively perpetuates this cycle of dysregulation.
Beating yourself up spikes your cortisol further, making you more likely to yell again an hour later.
The scientifically proven antidote to this cycle is self-compassion.
Yes. Researcher Kristen Neff has done groundbreaking work here, identifying 3 core components of self-compassion that are absolutely critical for parents.
They really are game changers.
I was reading through Neff's research, and the second component she identifies, common humanity, really struck me.
It's so power.
It's the simple recognition that you are not the only parent struggling. Like when you are hiding in the pantry eating a stale cookie just to get away from the noise, you feel uniquely broken.
You feel like you're the only one failing.
Exactly.
Ah.
Common humanity is reminding yourself that millions of parents across the globe have felt this exact same suffocating exhaustion. You are part of a shared human experience, not an isolated failure.
It completely breaks the isolation. And the other 2 components are self-kindness and mindfulness.
So self-kindness means treating yourself with the same gentle understanding you would offer a good friend in the same situation.
Rather than defaulting to harsh judgment.
And mindfulness.
Mindfulness is the practice of holding the painful experience in balanced awareness. You don't ignore the fact that you lost your temper and messed up, but you don't catastrophize it into, I am the worst parent in the world either.
But applying this in the moment isn't just an abstract mental exercise, right? The sources give very practical biological steps.
Yes, the first is utilizing self-compassion breaks.
So in the middle of the chaos, you simply pause, acknowledge that the moment hurts, and give yourself a physical gesture of comfort.
Like placing a hand firmly over your own heart or rubbing your chest.
Which actually stimulates the vagus nerve.
It physically drops your cortisol levels and forces the nervous system to begin calming down. It's biology, not just a nice thought.
Another proven method is the loving-kindness meditation.
Right, where you take a few minutes to send warm wishes to a loved one, then you intentionally send those exact same wishes to yourself, then to an acquaintance, and finally to the world at large.
And studies show that a regular practice of this actively lowers your baseline reactivity.
Making it much harder for your kids to push your buttons later in the day.
And the visualization techniques are incredibly powerful too.
You have the airplane one.
Yes. Imagine you are on an airplane, your toddler is having a nuclear meltdown, and every passenger in a 3-row radius is glaring at you.
Nightmare scenario.
Truly. But you visualize a highly supportive person, like a trusted friend, a mentor, or the most loving version of your own parents standing right beside you in the aisle.
You picture them putting a hand on your shoulder and telling you that you are doing a good job and that this moment will pass.
It recruits the brain's social support networks, even when you are entirely alone.
If we synthesize all of this, from understanding the biological reality of the toddler brain, to implementing green time, to managing our own sensory overload, the most liberating takeaway is that the goal is not perfection.
Right. The goal of parenting is not to become a stoic robot who never feels frustrated, never raises their voice, and is perfectly regulated at all times.
That is biologically impossible.
The rebound.
It is entirely about repair. When you lose your cool, the magic happens in the aftermath.
Going back to your child once everyone is calm and saying, I was really frustrated earlier and I yelled, that wasn't fair to you and I'm sorry, I am working on how I handle my big feelings.
That moment of repair teaches children a profound lesson. It teaches them that it is okay to be imperfect.
It models exactly how to take accountability and how to fix a rupture in a relationship.
A relationship that includes ruptures and repairs is infinitely more resilient than a facade of perfect calmness.
You cannot be the external brakes for your child if your own engine is overheating. We started today by realizing that children aren't malicious, they just lack the biological brakes.
And we explored practical ways to channel their energy and step out of those endless power struggles.
But the core realization is that regulating ourselves through self-compassion is the foundation of absolutely everything else.
It really is.
I want to leave you with a final provocative thought to mull over. We know from decades of psychological research that children eventually internalize the voices of their primary caregivers.
The way you speak to them literally becomes their inner voice.
Exactly. So consider this. Your own capacity for self-compassion was likely shaped by how your parents reacted to mistakes when you were young. Your child is currently watching, with wide eyes, exactly how you handle your own parenting fails.
That's a heavy thought.
It is. Is it possible that showing yourself grace out loud after you mess up is actually the most important behavioral lesson you will ever teach them?
You aren't just forgiving yourself. You are giving them the blueprint for how to forgive themselves in the future.
Take a deep breath today. Put a hand on your heart, show yourself some real kindness, and embrace the messy, chaotic, deeply beautiful reality of learning alongside these little humans. After all, if you can negotiate a peace treaty over a peeled banana, you can handle just about anything. Catch you next time on the Deep Dive.